The world unfolds differently for each of us. Why? Where do the rules come from? Within each of us, there is a unique philosophy shaping our thoughts, beliefs, feelings, worldviews, and actions. This is Inner Dialogues with Ecem, an introspective space for curious souls and minds. This is where you get to understand your individual philosophy that writes the script of your life. This is where we unveil the inner wisdom that guides you. Yep, that was your inner sage knocking the door. Let's go and chat with him. Hi, it's Ecem. Welcome back to Inner Dialogues with me. If you're listening to this episode on the day it was published, which is the 23rd of April, 2024, you're celebrating a big day with me. Today is the National Sovereignty and Children's Day in Turkey. We celebrate this national holiday with children all over the world. This day has quite a unique history behind it. On the same day, 23rd of April, 1920, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey was founded and met for the first time in Ankara during the War of Independence. Atatürk, the founder of the Republic of Turkey, gifted this day to the children to whom the future is entrusted. If you're learning about this festival, celebration, and national holiday for the first time, I highly encourage you to watch some videos of how Turkey welcomes children from all different countries to celebrate their holiday, to celebrate the future of our world. It is such a joy to witness. When I was a kid, I remember we used to host children from different nationalities in our school to celebrate this day dedicated to all of us, to all children in all countries. I'm not sure how it is right now, but back then the Turkish Radio and Television Corporation used to invite children worldwide to be a guest in a Turkish family for a week so that they get to share stories, exchange cultural practices, food and traditions until they participate in the celebrations and festivals on the 23rd of April. It used to feel like a big festival all around the streets in the whole country. We used to prepare shows, plays, games, colorful ornaments, and pick a traditional clothes of a country that we would like to represent on that day. The preparations in school used to take at least a month, with paintings, decorations, and all other organizations. My grandma is a tailor, and I remember I was in the first or second grade, I believe, and we were going to pick out traditional clothes from a nation or a country. I remember I wanted to choose Spain and wear a flamenco dress, those black and red long flowing dresses with ruffles. And of course, my grandma made it. It was beautiful. It felt like a whole different world I got to be and I got to live in for those couple of days that we got to prepare for the celebrations and the actual day we celebrated the National Sovereignty and Children's Day. Every kid in schools had to take a part in these celebrations some way or another, especially the elementary and middle school kids. And now I'm looking back on it, I remember those days of festivals or those 23rd of Aprils that we spent as a kid. They all felt like a birthday, You have an additional birthday to celebrate in a year. And it was a birthday that everyone knows about. If you are walking on a street with your family close to the date of 23rd of April, a random man dressed up like a cartoon character would give you a balloon or a bar of chocolate. Or you would see a Chinese kid walking on a street with a Turkish kid dressed up in Chinese traditional clothes. You would see elderly people gifting books to the kids. You would see everyone dressed up nicely to celebrate the children of this world, to celebrate your existence and the future you're going to create. Since I started talking in this episode, you probably realize I couldn't stop smiling. My eyes are filled with tears, happy tears, remembering all those celebrations I got to be in, remembering little kids dancing to the traditional songs they had never heard before in their traditional clothes of a country, witnessing those little kids saying konnichiwa, hola, привет, ciao, seeing on the news all those kids all over the world visiting Anıtkabir, Atatürk's mausoleum, in their traditional clothes. These things bring me joy, so much joy. That's why I'm saying, if you haven't seen any footage of these celebrations, I would highly encourage you to see some snippets of these celebrations. What are we going to talk about today? When I was thinking about the day I was going to post a new episode, I realized that it is the 23rd of April. It's the Children's Day. I'm no longer a child, maybe, but my parents still say Happy Children's Day to my brother and to me on every 23rd of April. And I say back to them, I say Happy Children's Day to my parents, to my grandparents, because I deeply believe that whatever we do with our lives, in our lives, it is for that kid that we once were. It is for that child still lives inside of us. All we are trying to do is to make his dreams come true. So yes, let's dedicate this episode, and whatever day you are listening to this, let's dedicate this day to children and to our inner child. We know it is still there. Shall we go and chat with him? The first thing that comes to my mind when I think about the phrase inner child is joy. Like pure, grounded, safe joy. A type of joy that feels familiar, right, and fulfilling. A joy that is naked from old shoulds and hence old shame. Shame lives with should. That's what Jova said in his vulnerable, joyful, reflective outgrow workshop. You may know him as the Artidote on Instagram. He shares wonderful pieces of writing alongside beautiful artworks, but he's actually a healing and empowerment coach. He said, if you see beauty and feel joy, you don't need to seek acceptance and permission from others. You don't need to question the beauty you see and the joy you feel. Instead, you have to follow it. And same thing goes for the inner child. Like the thing that brings us pure joy, the things that feel so deeply right, I think are the answers that are coming from our inner child. Like, for example, maybe you had a hard childhood, or maybe you had a joyful one. You had good memories, you had good support. I was lucky enough to have a good childhood, as good as I can recall, of course. But I recall my childhood as good, as happy, as joyful. So I think when I was talking about the National Sovereignty and Children's Day and the celebrations around it, my eyes were filled with tears, and it's coming again, and my cheeks were hurting because I was smiling nonstop for the last 5 minutes, because I think I remember those moments in my childhood where we got to celebrate children as pure joy, as pure festival, as purely being myself. So when I think about the things that bring me joy as a 24-year-old version of myself, I think about almost the same things. Well, I don't remember what used to bring me joy as a kid version of Ecem, but the things that bring me joy nowadays is like childish stuff. And when I say childish stuff, I don't use the word childish in a way to undermine. I use the word childish as not thinking the consequences, but instead just being present with the experience, with that current experience. So that's my definition of childish here in this moment. So when I think about what makes my inner child, what makes that little gem that I still have inside of me happy and joyful, I thought about swinging, literally. I'm thinking about a hammock, and swinging there, or I'm thinking about jumping on a trampoline. I'm thinking about using glitters on my nails. I'm thinking about using glitters on my face. I'm thinking about drawing, sketching, playing with colors, all sorts of colors. I'm thinking about putting up a spinning windrows, those colorful ones. In Turkey, they sell these little, as well as big windroses, colorful windroses, especially when there is a celebration going on, or when the spring or summer is around the corner, to put up in gardens, or to put up in front of our windows. What else makes me think and tap into my inner child? When I think about what brings comfort and joy to my inner child, I think about asking my mom to make a custard for me, a type of custard that is made with milk and rice flour only. And I think it brings a comfort and joy and warmth to my soul, because there's a story around it. My mom gave birth to me when she was 24. Yes, in the same age I am right now. And basically she was a young woman. So she was learning how to introduce solid foods to me, And at the time, my doctor, child doctor, told her that you should start with yogurt, you should introduce a couple of fruits, etc. And one of the things the doctor also said to her was to start giving and introducing this custard before she puts me to sleep at night, in order for me to sleep nonstop, not to wake up several times during the night, to be breastfed, basically. So she was telling me how she had such a big struggle with trying to understand the consistency of this custard. It shouldn't have to be thick. It shouldn't have to be so much watery, It has to be right consistency. And also, it has to be like 1 or 2 tablespoon at the beginning to introduce me at first. So she was having big struggles, but at the end, I loved it. I loved how she made it, and apparently I loved enjoying eating it as a baby. So on a psychological point of view, I have good memories with it, you know? Well, I don't know what would Freud say to that, but as a 24-year-old, to this day, I still love eating that custard, you know? Because of this story is so innocent. This story is full of growth. This story is about embracing learning, embracing not knowing, and embracing doing it for the first time. My mom, she's a mom, and she's a mom for the first time ever. And like all other moms in the world, she's not a first-time mom to my brother, but she's a first-time mom to that kid, you know, to my brother. So in that sense, every mom and child relationship is unique, and it is their first time being a parent to us, to that child. So thinking from this perspective, I just love this story. I just love her amateurness, you know, her eagerness to try, learn, screw up, try again, which is the definition of growth, isn't it? So custard, rice flour custard, is one thing that still to this day brings joy to my inner child. Because as I said, I think I have a strong and healthy relationships and memories to those moments where I was first introduced to. What else? What else brings joy to my inner child? Well, not so little Ecem was so much enjoying of singing and performing. Performing in the sense that before she got introduced to the stage and theater world, she was singing in her living room, you know. I have this picture, my mom taking the picture, I believe, and I'm singing, I'm dancing, but she is also holding a hairdryer in front of my face. Well, not in front of, but just below my waist, in order to give that effect of, you know, your hair is swinging, you're dancing and performing, you know, that kind of stage vibes. And I remember I felt like a star at that time, and then it evolved into doing karaoke all the time in our living room. We used to visit my uncle. He used to live in Moscow, and his friends used to come to visit him, to come dinners, etc. And I used to put on my roller skates and start singing, like giving concerts to them. This was a literal phrase that was used at that time, you know. I was performing and giving concerts, you know. And if I were to think from my perspective today, from you know, more grown up adult version of myself, it is silly. Like when you look back on it, it is silly. Even to talk about it, it sounds silly. But I think that's where the true work around inner child comes. Like being silly, being comfortable, allowing yourself being silly, being comfortable in being cringe. Now I'm realizing more and more, feeling cringy is a great sign of growth. It means that your previous standards is not the same as your standards today. That's whatever years old Ecem giving concerts to her uncle's friends. It was her standards of feeling joyful. It was her standards of showing up for herself. It was her standards for feeling like herself, you know? And now, I don't know how many years have passed, but 10 years, 15 years later, of course my standards are not the same. So, judging our past versions, our previous versions, based on our today's standards, of course it's going to feel cringy. But feeling cringy is not a bad thing. That's what I'm trying to ingrain into me. I don't want to take feeling cringy as something bad and shameful, you know, in a way that I regret or I dismiss that version of myself and do not even want to mention about it. Shame is a feeling that is insidious and sneaky. It harms us in the long run. All the shames we deeply feel inside but escape at the same time, not in order not to feel a grain of it, haunts us. It haunts us silently. It haunts us with our deep desires. It haunts us to constant seek for pleasure. In his vulnerable book called Man Enough, Undefining My Masculinity, Justin Baldoni quotes Brené Brown, and he says, quote, "Courage originally meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. Over time, this definition has changed, and today courage is more synonymous with being heroic." End quote. I so much empathize with this definition of bravery as speaking one's mind by telling all one's heart. It is brave. It requires a certain level of confrontation, self-confrontation, in order to go and speak your mind by pouring your heart or whatever your heart is carrying with you. So it is brave to honor how we feel. You know, if we are feeling cringy about a past version of ourselves, about something that we did or we did not do, if we are feeling cringy about it, or if we are feeling shameful about it, we prefer to stay silent. We prefer to cover it up. But that doesn't help. That doesn't help. It always finds a leak. It always finds a ray of sunshine to meet those shameful, so-called shameful memories of yours. Always finds a light to go and face with the world in order to serve you in the long run, in order to serve for your better version who's at peace with your childhood, who's at peace with all previous versions of yourself. When we talk about shame, cringe, all the feelings that we escape from, also the feeling of silliness that comes to my mind. Because I think as adults, as young adults, we escape from feeling silly. And I think this starts around the time we are trying to form our social image and identity during middle school and so much more in high school times. We're trying to become this adult who is sure of himself, who is confident, who is all-knowing, who is right, who's not feeling any doubts about himself. This kind of an image that we're trying to depict to the world, and this takes the silliness out of the equation, I think. We don't want to look silly, we don't want to sound silly, we don't like to perceived as silly. And I think that ends with a cost. It ends with a cost of starting to lose our individuality. It happened to me in middle school. It happened to me towards the end of elementary school. But I'm going to give you an example from my brother, because I was more of an observer to his middle school times. He used to want these toys that he saw his friends with playing, his friends was playing with. And then it evolved into wanting shoes that his friends were wearing. And then it got into the computer, the softwares that his friends were using, the games his friends were playing, etc., etc. So he got influenced by them, which is very normal at that age. But what I observed within him was that he got introduced into this digital gamer world quite late, and at the beginning he knew nothing about it, and he started to look silly in his social circle of friends, and he had quite hard times trying to educate himself and teach himself how to play those games and all that gamer universe that has been going on there. So he was trying to build an image, a social image of himself who wasn't silly, who was knowledgeable in gaming world, who was knowledgeable and skillful in different games and in different computer softwares, in design of his computer, like a gamer. So he beat this social image that looked silly for him. So he sacrificed his individuality and his maybe hobbies that gave him more joy at that time in order to be accepted by his friends and by the society. Now today he's a teenager, and what I'm witnessing him growing up is the difference between the existence and depiction of inner child in a boy versus in a girl, in a male and in a female, in a socially attributed masculine figure versus a socially attributed feminine figure. It is hard for him to speak up about his emotions and feelings, so he's covering up them in a form of seeking different passions and more like pleasures, momentarily pleasures, or just laughing it away, showing himself as not taking things as seriously. And yes, this is a social norm that was so much fed into the idea of masculinity. But I think this is a universal concept between all genders, because I think tapping into our feelings and emotions and trying to stay with them, allow them to be, to show us the way, is the most important way to get in contact with our inner child, who knows the truth, who knows the deep truth, who knows our deep securities and insecurities, who knows our deep joys and pure wisdom we have within. Feelings are a means to reach to our inner child, to heal our inner child, to get the fruits of our inner child. In this majorly important book by Mark Volin called It Didn't Start With You, How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. In this book, he says that, quote, when we block the feelings, we unknowingly stunt the necessary healing process that can lead us to a natural release. End quote. And I think this is valid for all types of feelings. The ones that we label as good, the ones that we label as bad, for both of them. You know, the bad ones are mostly the ones that we have hard times to stay with them. We most of the time subconsciously avoid from, escape from. To stay within, to allow to good feelings, so-called good feelings, to give a space for them, allows us to bring deep joy within us, allows us to find inspiration within these feelings, allows us to function from a higher frequency and vibration, the vibration of creation and the mode of desire instead of fear. Staying in and allowing those so-called bad feelings gives us a space to transform them by seeing their purpose in our lives, seeing their reasons, origins, and the area in which we get to work with them. Escaping and not allowing ourselves to feel those bad feelings lead us to function in the fear mode. I attended a group coaching session the other day, and one of the coaches asked me, "What is your fear response? Flee, freeze, or fight?" And I started explaining and giving my answer. And then she asked another question: how can you move to the desire mode? And that made me stop for a second. After a while of a deep silence, I told her, I don't know how. But I realized that for a while, I was functioning from a place of fear instead of desire and creativity. I wasn't sure about my aspirations, visions, my passions. I was feeling no enthusiasm toward life, toward my dreams. It almost feels like when I think about them, nothing comes to my mind. And I found the reason why. I said to her, I was living in a fear mode where it was immobilizing me, immobilizing my creativity, immobilizing my inner child who has the true joy and wisdom and inspiration. And I think functioning in the fear mode is such a lengthy topic, but I think one sign of it is to feel shame and escaping when we feel shame, when we feel shameful of what we have done previously or what we haven't done. In the same book, It Didn't Start With Us by Mark Volin, in the same book, he quotes a German psychotherapist, Bert Hellinger, to show the importance of generational trauma And this idea of being left out based on the feelings of shame, regret, and all those, bad feelings, so-called, we are trying to avoid within ourselves. And when we talk about what other people have done, he says that, quote, Hellinger has observed that when someone is rejected or left out of the family system, that person can be represented by a later member of the system. The later person might share or repeat the earlier person's fate by behaving similarly or by repeating some aspect of the excluded person's suffering. If, for example, your grandfather is rejected in the family because of his drinking, gambling, and philandering, it is possible that one or more of these behaviors will be adopted by one of his descendants. In this way, family suffering continues into subsequent generations. So this is a lengthy psychological theory and practice to work on this generational trauma. But I think the central topic here is shame, in the sense that when we feel shame, when we feel cringy, we escape from it. And as I said before, I think they are trying to find a leak within ourselves that has the potential of light, that has the glimpse of light. So they're trying to meet with the light to heal us, all the parts that you feel cringy about yourself, all the parts that you are shameful about yourself, they depict as themselves as shame in order to give us the opportunity to heal that version, that side of ourselves, in order to feel that inner child within you, within each of us. Our inner child lives in the moment. His biggest power maybe is his imagination, but he doesn't use it to imagine what could have happened if he wasn't behaved in that way. In other words, he doesn't use his imagination by overthinking and overanalyzing the past. He neither uses his imagination to come up with worst case scenarios. He asks, what would happen if meatballs were to rain instead of raindrops? He over-imagines the best and, in the adult world, impossible scenarios. Our inner child doesn't have shoulds. All it has is endless joy from which wisdom comes. Our inner child is simple. It has nothing that our adult versions have. It doesn't have a car. It doesn't have a fancy clothes. It doesn't have labels or titles. It doesn't know all the things we learn in school, in university, in business life. Yet he is free. She is free, joyful, whole, and present. Beyond what we have learned lies true freedom and wisdom. And that's where we meet our inner child. That's where we meet the pure and simple joy. I recently came across a quote by Dennis Waitley, and I think it fits our conversation about inner child and how she or he lives in the moment and has the pure joy. He said, quote, "Happy people plan actions. They don't plan results." End quote. As kids, we were chasing after one activity to another, which we love, not with the aim of improving our linguistic skills, improving our communication skills, or improving our mobility. Whatever result we are seeking in our adult minds today, we weren't seeking as a kid. There's so much lesson to learn from our inner child. And one of the most important ones, I think, is definitely experiencing and doing things for the sake of the experience, not for the sake of the expected result. I'm leaving you with a simple dialogue that was shared by Metin Hara, a Turkish author, in one of his books, which I believe hasn't been translated into English yet. Quote, "Isn't it very difficult to dance and sing?" No, it's actually very easy. However, dancing becomes difficult for those who are knowledgeable. End quote. Thanks for listening today. This is Inner Dialogues with Ecem, a place where you discover your inner you, a place where you belong. Until next week, I hope you give yourself time and space to tap into your inner child. Take care.